Is that good? Right, are you seated comfortably? Again, so let me start by saying that every act of making starts with an act of unmaking, that all making begins by taking apart. In 1977, my father packed my family onto the family dinosaur, and we went down to the University Theatre in Toronto to see a new movie called Star Wars. I was 6 years old. And the kind of stories that 6-year-olds got in 1977 in Canada were pretty limited because we had 3 channels over the air and no PVRs or VCRs or DVD players. And we certainly didn't have continuous access to kids programming, so it was just a few hours a day at most, and it was pretty simple fare. It was kind of the 70s equivalent of Teletubbies. So I had never seen a story like Star Wars. Now, Star Wars has its virtues, but that's not what I'm talking about here, the particular virtues of Star Wars. I'm just talking structurally. I'd never seen a story like Star Wars, a story with reversals, a story with multiple points of view, a story not told in strict chronological order. None of this stuff had ever occurred to me before, and it blew my mind. So I went home, and I grabbed scrap paper, and I stapled it up the side, and I trimmed it to the size of a mass market paperback, and I wrote out that story over and over and over again like a pianist practicing scales. And that's how I became a writer. That's how we learn. 1979, my dad was a computer science teacher, brought home an Apple II Plus. Apple very cannily gave all the computer science teachers in Ontario computers to take home for the summer to see if they would order them for their labs, because up until then, computer science in the Ontario school system was taught by punch card. You would fill in your punch cards, you would send them off, and a week later you'd get back the output, and if you bubbled in one box wrong, you started over again. And the way that I learned to program and the way that I learned to understand computers was by typing in long programs that came in magazines, magazines like Byte, and you would key in the whole program. The act of making, of unmaking these programs taught me to make programs, taught me to be a maker. After all, that's how all knowledge starts. Musicians start by practicing the scales, by taking apart the songs that they love and putting them back together again by performing them. This is not news. This is what Newton was talking about when he said, we stand on the shoulders of giants. So this is all by way of saying, by way of introduction, that copying is not a bug, it's a feature. We are descended by way of 4 billion years of evolution from molecules that somehow figured out how to replicate themselves. We have a name for those parts of our ecosphere's history that didn't replicate themselves. We call them extinct. When my daughter, who's just sitting here being an adorable Qton emitter and left moments ago, when she was born, my parents came over from Canada for a visit. My mom, her PhD is in early childhood education. She's something of a baby whisperer. And she said, you stuck your tongue out at her yet? And I said, no, Mom, I have not stuck my tongue out at my newborn yet. Why would I stick my tongue out at my newborn? She said, oh, just watch. She picked her up in her arms. My daughter was 2 weeks old at this point. She had not seen a mirror. She certainly, although she had hands and used them to explore her body, it was never in any systematic way. It was a lot of flailing. And so, by the way, saying she didn't really know about her tongue in the way that you and I know about our tongues. But my mom picked her up in her arms, and she did this. And my daughter looked back up at her, and she did this. Because we copy like we nuzzle for the breast. Copying is where language acquisition comes from. Copying is where all of our skills acquisition comes from. Copying is the thing that makes us into the species that we are today. And copying is certainly where our technology comes from. Everything that we make is built on the things that were made before. We take them apart, we put them back together again. But the law does not act as though this were true. And in some very specific and important ways, it acts as though this were a crime and not a virtue. And in particular, I want to talk today about anti-circumvention, which is a feature of law around the world. In Canada, where I'm from, it just came into law, Bill C-11. In the United Kingdom, it's part of the EUCD, the European Copyright Directive, which dates back to around 2002. In America, it dates back to 1998, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And what these various laws all do is they say that if you remove a lock from a device, regardless of whether or not you have removed that lock for a lawful or unlawful purpose, the removal of the lock itself is not allowed, right? If there is a thing that the device is designed to stop you from doing, and you figure out how to do it anyway, that's a crime, even if the thing that you were doing is not illegal. So that is bananas. It's bananas for lots of reasons. It's bananas in particular because it's supposed to protect what we sometimes call intellectual property. Not a very good term in my view, but still, the idea here is that this somehow protects the interests of creators. But it's a funny kind of way to protect the interests of creators, because if you buy one of Apple's devices, which work pretty well, you know, you've got your iOS tablets, your iOS phones, and so on. If you buy one of these devices, and I write a program for that device, and I want to sell it to you, but Apple doesn't want to carry it in their store, the only way you can install it on your device is by jailbreaking it. That is to say, by unlocking it. And the act of unlocking it is illegal. And so your purchase of my work is somehow made illegal by a statute whose intention is putatively to protect the rights of creators. How do we protect the rights of creators? By making it illegal for people who want to buy our creations to give us money for them. This is a bad piece of policy as befits creators. But that's not the whole story, because the world is a lot bigger than creators. You know, I make my living off of copyright. You know, we pay our mortgage off of copyright. I you know, buy my daughter's plastic injection molded junk from China by way of copyright. And so, you know, copyright's important to me, but honestly, it's time for people who earn their living from copyright to get over themselves, because this is a lot bigger. Computers are a lot bigger than the tiny 1% of 1% of 1% of society who make their living by creating entertainment works to help you pass the long hours between the cradle and the grave, right? Computers do lots of important things in our world. So what does it mean to make a device that somehow tries to stop you from doing something that you want to do with it? What it means is not that you design a device that is lacking a feature. An iPad does not lack the feature that allows it to run code that hasn't been signed by Apple. There is no general purpose computer that runs every program except for some program that upsets the person who made it. What it means to have a computer that stops you from doing something that you want to do is that you have a computer that out of the box comes with a program that watches what you do. It comes with some part of its operating system that watches what you do and waits for you to do the thing that is prohibited by the manufacturer. And when it sees you doing it or thinks that you're doing it, that program swims to the fore and says, effectively, I can't let you do that, Dave. Now, by its very nature, if you are to design a computer that frustrates its owner's legitimate ends, the things that the person who is holding the computer, paid for the computer, who owns the computer wants to do, you have to design that computer somehow to hide secrets from the owner. Because if the program that swims up and says, I can't let you do that, Dave, is represented by an icon on your desktop labeled HAL9000.exe, you will surely drag it into the trash, right? So, in order for the computer to hide the existence or stop you from deleting this program, it somehow has to be designed that when you say, is there a program called HAL9000 in this directory? To say, no, there's no such program here, even when there is. Right? You have to design a computer that has a mote in its eye, that lies to you about the contents of its directories. Otherwise, you will find the program that you don't like, the objectionable program, and you will drag it into the trash. Now, that's bad news, but it's not where it starts, not where it ends, it's just where it starts, because you also may be a little more canny. You may not be looking for the HAL9000 program to drag into the trash. You might be smart enough to use a process monitor, you know, and say, list out all the processes running on this processor and tell me, is there one labeled HAL9000? And if there is, kill that process. Kill -9, sudo kill -9. Really just kill the heck out of it, right? So you also have to design a computer that has a mote in its eye about what processes are running. You have to have a computer that lies about that too. Now that's cute when it's at an Infocom game. You may remember the old Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy text adventure. Look, I see nothing here. Look, I see nothing here. Look, I see nothing here. Look, oh, maybe there's something here. That was an adorable bit of humor from Douglas Adams, but that was not a manual for statecraft. So this matters because unless you can see what your computer is doing, you can't stop it from doing things that run contrary to your interest. In 2005, Sony shipped out about 6 million audio CDs with something called a rootkit on them, a piece of malicious software, that did exactly this. It blinded your computer to the presence of an anti-copying program that would wait to see if you were trying to rip your CDs, and if you were, it would shut down the process. So any program, any file on your computer that had $S YS at the start of that program, it wouldn't show up in directory listings and it wouldn't show up in process listings.